CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success.
First of all, thank you everybody for joining us. This is a very special edition of CMMS Radio. We're doing it live. We're doing it at the Sustainable Manufacturing Expo. We are just going to kick it off. We're going to get into some questions. One of the reasons I have Corey Dickens on this panel today in this special episode is he really understands maintenance and reliability. And what we want to talk about is how a computerized maintenance management solution, regardless of what you use, can have an impact and contribute to and create sustainability. There's different things that we have to get out of the way first in the way of housekeeping. So first, CMMS is a computerized maintenance management software tool that's designed for you to see, track, and manage all the different things that are happening within your manufacturing facilities or otherwise. The most important part of that is maintenance management. And we want to first define what is maintenance. So I'm going to lean on Corey for that. So Corey, could you tell us what is maintenance?
Maintenance, as a verb, is the act of maintaining. So it's the actions that a group of individuals within the organization take to protect the function of the asset or the system. And I clarify the difference between an asset and a system. The job ultimately is to protect the function of the system by addressing the failure modes related to each asset.
Excellent. So now, one other thing that's important for this event and for this particular episode is defining sustainability. And sustainability, most simply stated, I'm going to take a shot at that and say what we really want to do is reduce waste. We want to minimize that, potentially eliminate it. So we're going to try to tie that all together with a series of questions. And when it comes to this overall concept of leveraging technology, digital strategy, digital transformation, we're using these systems to track the different metrics that are happening within a plant. We want to see how we're doing on uptime. We want to look at other ways we can bring in more efficiency, but before you become efficient using these technologies, we have to also be effective. So first, Corey, why and how is effectiveness paramount when it comes to becoming efficient within the realm of manufacturing, leveraging maintenance management software, and sustainability?
The difference between effectiveness and efficiency can be debated a lot academically. I'm not an academic. I'm someone who has worked in a manufacturing facility, and I have firsthand seen us trying to look for efficiency improvements on flawed processes. So it's like trying to build a house on top of a shaky foundation. It's always subjective to failure, right? And there's only so much potential, where if you start with a solid foundation, in maintenance, think about addressing and identifying the function of an asset, identifying and stating the functional failure of that equipment, and then always trying to maintain the function of it, right? That allows you to track the effectiveness of the asset. If you've heard of like OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, some people would debate there's some flaws in that metric. It doesn't take into account like energy conservation and some other metrics. Think of it like you perform inspections on your equipment, right? Or someone within your operation, they go out and perform visual inspections. How many times is a defect found during those inspections? If it is single-digit percentage, it's not an effective task. The window of frequency is not effective. If you find it 100% of the time, that means the frequency is too great, right? You may need to change the frequency at which. So I think starting with effective, ensuring we're doing the right things first, and then we do it the right way is something you build on top.
And then to add to that, if we're looking to achieve efficiency and we want everything to be sustainable, we have to look at the different opportunities. So we can leverage technology like a CMMS to set up things in the system as it relates to preventive maintenance, but then we would want to do things like add in kitting or full kitting, that's K-I-T-T-I-N-G. You want to do these things to, again, eliminate waste. We want to save time. We want to have things on the ready. One thing that's really important to drive towards a more sustainable operation, I think, is to optimize your preventive maintenance scheduling. So these systems can be leveraged for setting up and scheduling your preventive maintenance items. Be very careful with OEM specs on your preventive maintenance schedules, only because everything changes once you're in your specific environment at your plant or at your factory. But I want to ask you, Corey, when it comes to PM, or preventive maintenance optimization, how do you see that playing out as it relates to creating more sustainability? And again, as we've kind of agreed, we're eliminating waste.
You kind of mentioned it, your definition of sustainability. When you asked me earlier, it's resource conservation. It's the optimal use of the limited resources we have. And people are a resource. Their time is a resource. We pay them money for their services. That is a resource. We only have a limited amount of those resources. So why waste it on inspections where we never find defects? Why keep doing these rounds or stock a bunch of spare parts, taking up shelf space that have a holding cost associated, or the manual time spent of going through paper work orders to punch it into some kind of formula to print out a KPI or this report, right? A CMMS is only effective when it's built on effective habits, but it is the most efficient way of getting to the end goal.
Right, and that brings us back to the heart of the matter that you're always going to hear me talk about, and that is people and process first, because you need to have sound culture, a team that's moving in the right ways, that are in fact effective and bought in. Otherwise, these technology platforms that you use, they're not going to work. It's not possible. You have to have people that are bought in. Now, getting back to how we leverage the technology, you mentioned something about spares, parts. I'm thinking about the storeroom. If we're talking about critical spares that we need on hand to minimize downtime, right? Let's say there was a catastrophic failure, it's a particular unit, and now we've got the critical spare sitting in that area of the plant, we can now bring it in. There are some parts, other supplies, and critical spares that can become obsolete over a period of time. So a CMMS could also be leveraged to dial that in further so that you have a strong program that, would you say, allows you to almost never run out of product or critical spares or parts, while also not keeping so much on hand because they face pretty severe degradation risks?
I mean, think of it, if you have a homegrown system, how complex is the integration between the inventory and then building some kind of trigger point to tell you you're getting low on these, and then mapping that back to the equipment in the work events and making all of it report together. And again, like you said, in a CMMS, maybe having a report that says, because we know the transaction history of this part, when's the last time we used this part from inventory? And it's not as clear cut as, oh, we haven't used it in 722 days, we're just going to throw it away or throw it on eBay. It's more of a, hey, do we need to validate that we still need this and stock it? It's a simple question. It's a validation tool. It lets you track that information over a long period of time, centrally in one place, and say, is this something we need to keep, or can I sell it on eBay?
Yeah, and so these are other strategies within manufacturing environments or otherwise that can also be incorporated. I don't know how much the CMMS plays a role, but I think everybody should be doing something to evaluate what they have that is moving from useful life that could then be repurposed out into the community. I'm just throwing this in there. I've recently heard some stories about organizations that can push machines that have failed or going to be decommissioned out to high schools, community colleges, for people 100%. To use that for learning opportunities. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That's an important concept. Now,
can I make a comment on that?
Absolutely.
So I know Jim and I have been on this, and I know CMMSradio. The first Friday every October annually is Manufacturing Day. I got involved with Manufacturing Day this last year, so a local community college in my area has an industrial technology program. They've taken over an old Martin Marietta facility right in Neris that used to do some aggregates. They're reconditioning the facility, and they're getting donations from brands about equipment, and then they're letting, again, the people going through an instrumentation and maintenance course, they get to take care of that equipment. They get to learn how it operates. They get to operate it, learn the sequence of operation, right? They get hands-on with it. So it's a great point. Again, look into those education, because that's feeding your pipeline that you're crying from the rooftop saying, I don't have enough people with experience. So find that talent pipeline locally to you and invest in building it up.
And the idea behind all of this is everything's connected. It's not just about the software. It's not just about the things that we're doing and producing and selling and delivering on everything. It's the people in the process, and we got to fill that skilled trades gap, and that's another way to close that loop. And that, in my mind, is sustainable. And how we tie it to a CMMS, I would think, is when you're leveraging the CMMS to manage your assets, and you've got good equipment hierarchies, you're managing work orders that might be corrective in nature, you're managing preventive maintenance items, and you also can, through that tracking, maybe some meter reads, start to trigger some notifications internally to say, this asset is moving towards end of life, and we know that because of this, and that, and we can now schedule that, pushing it out into the community so that it can be serving other purposes. I want to switch gears. When we talk about CMMS, maintenance management, there's leadership, there's culture. I mentioned it early on. And Jim Mayer is here. He's the manufacturing connector.
Sorry I'm late, guys, by the way.
It's the real world. No problem. I want to ask you, when it comes to technology, and we're in an organization, how do we connect that to the organization through culture development, and where and how does leadership play a role in the adoption of these technologies?
I love that question.
You take it.
All right. I do want to hear your take on it, though, man. And before I answer that, Greg, I do want to go back to something you said earlier about the skills gap, because I don't necessarily truly believe we have a skills gap anymore. I believe that gap is culture. We have a culture gap, not a skills gap. We have people, we have done a better job in the last 20 years of getting young people interested. We, don't have the capacity to take on more manufacturing, right? Yes, we need younger people to fill those jobs, but we've got to change the culture internally to keep those kids engaged in their jobs. Because if we don't, then they are simply going to start and stop and leave the industry together. These young people are not like the Gen Xers or even millennials, where they would try it with one company, they didn't like one company, and they would go to the next one and the next one and the next one. It was $25, $50, $1 an hour more, and they got those bumps, but they stayed in the industry. Gen Z is not that way. They're gone. And if we lose them forever, right? Yep. So I don't think our issue anymore is the skills gap. I think it's the culture gap. Now, going back to what you asked directly, sorry to digress a little bit, but when we talk about how do we make that happen, how do we ingrain something like CMMS technology into our culture, it's all through cultural change, right? It's change management 101. We historically have been taught since we're all very young that we all hate change, that change is a bad word, right? The truth is, change is great. People love change. If people didn't love change, we wouldn't have the travel industry, we wouldn't have fashion, we wouldn't have restaurants, we wouldn't have all these things that people get to change every day of their lives. People truly love change. What they hate is change that is forced upon them. They love change that is offered and that they have a say in. So if we go to our people internally and we say, hey, our problems are X, Y, and Z, how do we solve those? And they say, through CMMS, through technology X, Y, or Z. That's how we ingrain that into our culture long term, so it's not just a stopgap that will change when the next leadership takes hold.
I like that, because something that we commonly see, so we're talking about leveraging this technology in our environments, in our plants, in our organizations, but we do see changes in leadership, whether that be supervisors, mid-level management, on and on like that, where someone will literally parachute in. They, in my view, don't have much time to get up to speed, and they lose a lot of visibility in those moments because they have to move fast. And now they might not pay attention to the maintenance department and the CMMS, and it falls upon them, but I do understand how they can't see it. The challenge for me is always, how do we get people to understand what's really happening in the maintenance department, on the shop floor, throughout the factory? And that doesn't happen behind a desk. That means you got to get out there amongst them and understand it. Don't just look, but ask questions. And hey, why do you like that CMMS that we have? Why do you not like it? What would we need to do to make it easier for you to buy in and use it?
Yeah.
That becomes sustainable, no?
There's a perfect example of this to both points, and it's a toothpaste factory. And as toothpaste factory, there was a conveyor belt moving the toothpaste packaging, right? And at one machine, it was supposed to put the tube of toothpaste that has a weight to it in the packaging, and then it goes through. The issue they found was there were too many empty packages coming out the end of the line. So they, management huddles together in their ivory tower, and they said, what are we going to do to fix it? Someone has a bright idea. They bring in a consulting group. They pay all this money, and they implement a scale. And there's an alarm tied to that scale at the end of the line, and it's supposed to weigh it. And it dings the alarm and shuts off the line to say, hey, there's a packaging here. It's missing. It's not weighed properly, right? Well, 3 or 4 of those alarms going off and shutting down the line, everyone's swarming all the time. A young little maintenance guy walks up and implements a solution, and no one knows a thing about this until a week later they get their metrics and they say, this alarm hasn't tripped one time. What has changed in our process? We implemented and spent all this money to build this measurement tool, right? But we didn't change any other variables. What happened? They go out to the line. The kid set up a fan on a desk right next to it, because if there's no toothpaste in the packaging, there's no weight to it, just blows it off. He put it in front of the scale because he was tired of getting called out to tend to it. If we would have just gone to those people and asked, what could we do? Involve them in it. That's a what's in it for me, right? Get their buy-in, and you can solve a lot of big problems very simply without having to pay consulting and engineering and redesign, right? So be careful. Be careful how complicated you make things.
As a consultant, I will say
Sorry.
I will say you're 100% correct. 90%, probably more, of the problems that I walk in and help companies solve, they're able to solve on their own with the knowledge that they have on the shop floor. But a lot of their leadership and this comes down to narcissism, ego, and some of the toxic traits of leadership that don't look. Sorry, am I going too far off topic here?
No, I'm just reacting because you're right.
They have the people there, but they're not willing to give those people the time to have a say, and that's when those change metrics fail.
So I reacted and kind of went like this, and everything you guys are both talking about here just reminds me of why it's such a challenge. And when you're leveraging technologies, you're trying to fix the way your team is moving, get everything connected, get everybody working together. I'm always seeing and hearing about, I don't know that it's going to change, we need to slow down if we're going to speed up. You have to do the work. Much like what Corey said earlier, where and even in a session earlier today, where you must first be effective before you become efficient. If you're going to make a change, you have to actually do the things that allow for that change. That means the work has to be done, and too often, the shop floor, the people that are really going to have to do it are either by design or there's just not enough time. They're not included, and you aren't going to succeed that way. They just keep on going, and you can't continue to gloss over those things. Your technology is going to fail. You're not going to be sustainable. That's not possible in an environment like that. The best you will do is some surface level sustainability, and this is something I am very passionate about.
Well, I just want to ask you a question, Greg. So you said slow down so you can speed up, right? But I think that takes a lot of the risk. I think that takes also a lot of the reward off of the table, right? I think that one of the favorite things that I see are these software startups that their motto is let's move fast and break things, right? The reason I love that is because it allows failure to happen. One thing that we are afraid when we are implementing change projects is allowing people to fail. We want it to happen, and we want it to happen right. So if we just say, gloves are off, you're allowed to go as fast as you want, move fast, and break things. We know there's going to be failure. That changes the dynamic of that. Instead of saying, hey, slow down so we can then speed up. We have to crawl before we walk, before we run, right?
I think this is like the Deming cycle, right? PDCA, plan, do, check, act. Take the gloves off, let them run, let them break it, and then we sit back and say, what failed, why did it fail, how can we improve it?
And then
you rebuild the confidence and the motion, and then you add speed again, something else breaks. It's area of constraints. You kind of keep chasing those areas of improvement.
That's right, and that is the area in which and how I'm thinking of the idea of slowing down. It's that let's go do this, and then once we encounter a problem, stop and fix it. Yeah. Stop and fix it. That's all I'm talking about.
And
stop,
fix it forever. Don't forever patch it.
Good
no
point.
Band-Aids that are duct tape, right?
That was the conversation earlier about maintenance in the PF curve, right? And designating base condition, desired performance. But we're always preaching these productivity metrics, right, on a flawed process. And then we ask maintenance to get it back into service as quick as possible, not as well as possible.
That's the difference. And those are the things that I think we all know, but we're beholden. We got to make our numbers. We got to keep going. We can't slow down that much. And
that's why one of my favorite sayings is think big. Think big, start small, act fast, fail quick.
You had given an example before, and I had some notes here on some things I wanted to share with everyone. So when we talk about sustainability and how CMMS plays a role in creating that, I'm just going to read some stuff to you. So Coca-Cola Energy. Coca-Cola. They achieved significant reductions in energy use and water waste by ensuring equipment was running efficiently and proactively addressing maintenance issues before they led to equipment failure or inefficiency. The source on that is Coca-Cola Enterprises Sustainability Report 2017. But wait, there's more.
There's a lot more.
Now we're going to talk about PepsiCo, because we talked about Coca-Cola. They took a proactive approach leveraging CMMS, and it allowed them to reduce downtime, extend the lifespan of equipment, and minimize the need for replacement parts, contributing to more sustainable production practices. The source on that is the PepsiCo Sustainability Report from 2020. I am not done yet. I just want people to hear these real-world examples that can give you a willingness to explore doing this in your facilities, your organizations, and your plants. So, the last one I'm going to bring up is Siemens. They utilize CMMS for these things, and the result they received was a reduction in energy consumption and a significant improvement in operational sustainability, as well as the avoidance of unnecessary repairs and replacements. And that is from the Siemens Sustainability and Digitalization Report 2020. So the whole point of bringing up these examples and talking about CMMS, talking about leadership, culture, change management, and all the maintenance and reliability best practices is so that we can find ways to embrace these technologies but roll them out properly, babysit them a little bit. In other words, bringing in technology like this is not a set it and forget it type approach. It's the same as maintenance, and in and of itself, everything needs maintenance of some type. Otherwise, it's going to underperform, it's going to degrade, and it could and will fail. So one thing I wanted to do with this episode is just open it up for Corey and Jim to bring anything to the crowd that you want to, as far as CMMS and maintenance management best practices, and then for Jim, really attack it from the leadership and change management viewpoint.
I'm going to pepper 2 examples. Feel free to jump in on them.
Yeah, you got it.
So who here is in charge of driving sustainability initiatives within your organization? Anybody? No? All right, well, there's someone that is, right? I can almost guarantee you the first sustainability initiative that any organization undertakes is usually around lighting control, motion sensing, occupation, right? Because there's a Department of Energy statistic that says in industrial settings, 30% of the energy bill, utility bill, is wasted. So they automatically think of lighting, right? Because that's the easiest kind of small project, right? Then it turns into bay doors and roll-ups and the lost heat if you're a northern state, right, in the cold months. Leaving those bay doors open for forklifts to go in and out with materials and just watching the wasted energy go. Where you evolve from there is now that you track and manage your energy usage at a facility level, now you got to get deeper within the facility, and that's where CMMS helps. It's the most efficient and effective means of tracking where's your money going within this group of people, right? The actions and the behaviors and the failures, the reasons. That gives you your top 10 asset problem list, and then you can go one by one of those. Is there something we can do? Is this inefficient? Is there a replacement asset component like compressors or boilers or heat exchangers? Is there a more sustainable option on the market that also reduces our annual maintenance cost? And that's where you start seeing big impact. Like Jim said, you got to start kind of small, right? Fail quick and improvise and build confidence in the motion. Get the leadership really engaged in driving some of that profitability. It has to be tied back to finance, right? Anything we do in a business. That's why maintenance is still kind of fighting for its place, because some organizations do it well, many don't. We can't tie it back to the top dollar. Either saving money in the bottom line or increasing our top line. So we have to do that, and I think that's where you start seeing the bigger tangible impact, but you got to start small.
I want to, and I wish I knew these statistics offhand, right? But I would be very interested not only in your three examples, but what you were just talking about, Corey, what the turnover is at Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Siemens. Because I think that those three companies that you mentioned do a really good job of hiring based on values versus people who can fog a mirror, which is historically how we've hired in manufacturing.
Is that another term for mouth breathers?
No, it just means that they have a pulse, right? If they have a pulse, we'll hire them. That's historically been how we've hired, at least for the last 20 years in
Bodies
manufacturing.
and chairs, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think as manufacturers, Siemens, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, do a good job of hiring based on values. And all three of those companies have shown that sustainability and ecology are values that they hold dear, right? So I would wager, I don't know because I didn't look at the statistics, but I would wager that those companies have below average turnover rates for manufacturing. So that's my challenge to everybody here and anybody listening to this episode is take a look at the values that you have. If you value the environment, environmental issues, sustainability, make that a value. But don't make it a word that just goes on the wall and doesn't mean anything, right? Yeah. Write a value behind it and then have a sustainability report like a Coca-Cola, right? Tie it back to that. Tie the employee's purpose to the values. Once you are able to connect those dots as a leader, you get discretionary effort out of the people. You get more employee engagement, which then leads to discretionary effort, which means higher productivity, which means higher revenues and more profit, right? If you just do that simple thing and tie those values to the purpose and to the job that each employee does, you will make more money in the long run.
That's and the more you talk about it, the more I think about it. I just keep thinking of all these companies that move in these great ways. They're really chasing continual improvement. They're highly optimized as an organization. People stay for a long, long, long time. They even bring in their up-and-coming family as they get out of college, and they really thrive. And on top of that, they're not just leveraging CMMS, but all the other technologies, and they're creating through reliability best practices and other practices, they're creating great products that go out into the world, and we can see them. You know, the big brands that we just talked about, they make great things, but they're actually really all about it. It's an interesting thing, and it's not easy to do. And once you have it, you have to have practices set in place to nurture it, to cultivate it. Otherwise, that could go away like that.
Absolutely.
So in and of itself, an organization like that is sustainable, manufacturing with sustainability, very likely has a lot of reliability, very likely incredible safety when we look at the numbers deeply as far as during year in, year out, minimal events.
Well, we know well-maintained assets are safer to operate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well-maintained assets are more sustainable, and well-maintained assets also contribute to better quality performance as well. But again, that's where quality and safety, they're typically not one of the values of an organization.
Nope.
But they are pillars of which an organization that does well and is good at what they do, it's one of the pillars that their culture is built on. So I think same thing with reliability. Reliability is repeatability. So again, do we have a reliable culture or not? Do we have a safety-conscious culture or not? Do we have a sustainable-focused culture or not?
Again, we're just linking it all
culture
together.
is a culmination of behaviors and acts between people.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that any better myself. Thank you.
Neither could I. So well done.
And you're the culture guy.
We've got a few more minutes left, and what I'd like to do is see if anyone out there has any questions at all about what we've discussed or what we were going to discuss. Anything?
I do want to make one point about culture as an example. Heard this on Jim's podcast, right? I believe it was Sprocket.
Oh,
Drop Sprockets.
Early in the days.
Yeah.
He was talking about the culture that they were building. A work hard, play hard culture, right? And I hope that's the right episode.
Absolutely.
And he talks about they were hiring a new plant manager. And they were, during the hiring process, they went through a lot of highly qualified candidates. And one of the things the hiring committee really centered themselves on is like qualifications is the baseline to get to the meeting. But in the meeting, it's, do you fit our culture? You're going to lead this organization and our operation. Do you fit that culture? Perfect example, because they're work hard, play hard type people. They had a question in the interview, what's your favorite comedy movie, right? And they asked one of the most highly qualified candidates they had, and the guy just straight face said, I don't see how that's relevant to this conversation.
You really pay attention, man.
I do.
Dang.
And again, it reinforced the point of like, that's who we're going to pay a large sum of money and give a lot of responsibility to this organization. And they're going to erode the fabric that we have built from the top down. So be careful about that. You don't have to ask a question like, what's your favorite comedy? I know my sister, when she works at the job she's at now, she was asked about Harry Potter. She's a big Harry Potter fan. They did their research, right? And it was that connection, right? So find what's valuable to you and your organization. Understand the root trait of the behaviors you want to reinforce and you want the projection of your people and how they act, and anchor yourself on that and ask that question and hire the right people. You can train skill. It's not easy, let's be honest. It does cost some money, it does take some time, but it is far more beneficial for an organization to invest in the skill development of people than trying to change who they are if they're not the right culture fit.
Because that will never happen.
It will never.
It is literally a spinning wheel of death if you try and fix somebody's cultural fit with training. It will never happen. You will go broke. It will never happen. But you can train for skill. You can improve for skill. So, yeah.
I like to say focus on the input, right?
Yeah.
Hiring is the input. And the toothpaste factory, everything they were doing was mitigating an outcome. Mm-hmm. They never said, hey, what should we do to make sure that the tubes are in the packaging in the first place?
I have a question for everybody. Do any of you at your organization have a CMMS platform? You do?
Siemens does.
Of course they do. I know that. We're just not talking about that.
We know that.
So it's interesting to me. Is your facility or organization doing manufacturing? Okay. Just
hey,
curious.
It's a question to go back and ask.
Yeah.
How are we managing this? And again, really good teams can get really far in Excel or SharePoint or a lot of homegrown systems, right? Are we to the point where we need to take that next step? Is there something functionally missing? And we don't want to be the builders of it, because CMMS today, let's be honest, it's been commercialized pretty well. It's not terribly expensive.
That's true, and I think the reason I wanted that engagement is just to get an understanding for myself how many organizations out there still don't have one. Maybe they have one and they don't know that they do. That's not an area of the business that they spend time in, but it's kind of fascinating to me. Another thing, when you're out there in the world looking for a CMMS or similar platform, it could be enterprise asset management or related, there is a plethora, and I'm just being kind with that word, of solutions out there, and you don't necessarily know who to work with or why to work with them. And I don't necessarily think that's the way to approach it. I think you want to work internally within your organization. What do we do now? How is that working? Are we thriving? And is it sustainable? You got to ask those questions first before you go out looking to solutionize what may or may not be a problem. I just wanted to throw that in there. Jim, you had something.
Yeah, I just say, along with that, people may have it. They may just not be utilizing it to its full extent as well, right? We see that all the time where I was just in a shop last week, and they have an ERP system that has modules that can do so much. And again, if they had listened to their employees who had solved all the problems that I went in and identified before I went in, they could have saved a lot of money, but they had me come in because they trust me, and I identified these issues, and they all because they are not utilizing the technology that they currently have to its full potential.
Yep.
Because these solutions are so commoditized and they're so prevalent and they build so many features, I don't think it's realistic to say we're going to utilize it to its full potential. We need to utilize it to the full potential which we require, we
100%.
need, right?
Yeah.
But if we talk about CMMS versus ERP, they have a maintenance module. I can almost with 99% certainty guarantee why they're not using it. They didn't find it easy to use.
Sure.
They weren't involved in the buying process, right? They already had the seats. They said they needed a maintenance module. They weren't specific in what they needed and what they were looking for. And someone said, let's add some more seats. Yep. And again, ask the people at the floor, what do you need to help? What do you need to enable you to do it more efficiently or more effectively? What kind of metrics does the board need? How do we tie this again? You asked a question earlier. I think, Jim, I need you to weigh in here. Why aren't these things utilized to their full potential? It's because one group in the business buys it, one is in charge of utilizing it day to day, and they weren't involved in the first conversation, and it's just a friction, right? And it's a lack of ownership, too, at the same point of who owns this solution going forward. We see that in everything in manufacturing. Far too many good idea fairies, and I say that as a Navy guy, and I have a lot of good ideas, but I'm very much so about like, hey, I'm only gonna have a few of these at a time, and I need to finish one before I move on to the next. I am not a multitasker, right? My engineers and manufacturers were always multitaskers. 25 projects at one time, nothing ever got done, right? I'm like, just let me finish this one thing and I'll move on. So I'm like the extreme ownership kind of guy. Maybe that's a value that you need to look for or cultivate of someone in your maintenance organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. So obviously this is a subject that we could go on and on about, but first I want to thank you for attending, and I hope some of this was helpful for you. I also want to let you know, Jim Mayer, the Manufacturing Connector, you can find him on LinkedIn, and you can look up the Manufacturing Connector. Corey Dickens, he is on LinkedIn. You can reach out to him there. And just to remind you, he is at Brightly Software. That is a Siemens company. He's very knowledgeable in maintenance and reliability. Jim Mayer's your guy on leadership, culture, change management, and beyond. And I hope everybody sticks around for the next couple of hours, because there is going to be a fun 2-hour event after this session. It starts at 5 o'clock. And that is called the after party, or is it
Welcome
reception?
Yeah.
So I hope to see you all there. If you have any questions for us, because we tried to cover a lot in a short period of time.
And if you do come to the welcome reception, I'm going to have a camera crew following me around from News and Brews. They have tasked me with progressively get drunker over the next 2 hours. So if you want to come hang out with me, have a conversation on camera, and drink, then I'm your guy. So come hang out.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.